Welcome all to Leica Conversations, where we explore the stories in front and behind the lens of photographers who shape the way we see our world. We'd love to know where you're tuning in from, so chime in using the chat feature. And if you have any questions for our photographers today, please use the Q&A feature and we will do our absolute best to get to the questions. Today, we're pleased to present Movements, Moments, and Memory, exploring how certain moments shape our memories and influence how we approach the next photograph. With us today are two prolific photographers, Sheila Pree, who is an acclaimed international fine art photographer who portrays large-scale works that combine a wide range of knowledge of contemporary culture. Sheila is known for her series 1960s Now, Suburbia, Plastic Bodies, and Young Americans. Bright is the recipient of several nominations and awards, and recently was awarded the commission for Picturing the South by the High Museum of Art in Atlanta. Her work can be seen in numerous private and public collections, including the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C., the Library of Congress, National Harvard Art Museums, and more. Also with us today is Cheriss May, who is a lauded portrait and editorial photographer based in Washington, D.C. She's on the board of directors of Focus on the Story, was the immediate past president of Women Photojournalists of Washington. She's the co-chair of photography at the National Press Club. She's an Adobe Education Leader and an adjunct professor at Howard University. Cheriss has been published in O Magazine, the White House Historical Association, the New York Times, Bloomberg, Time, ABC News, The Today Show, and so much more. Her work will be seen at the Leica Gallery in LA this May. So if you are in Los Angeles, please stop by and take a look. And with that, we're pleased to present Movements, Moments, and Memory. Cheriss, I'd love to start with you and your work, beginning with hope, or more succinctly, the audacity of hope.
The audacity of hope. That's what I think about when I look back on this image. I started covering politics in the White House, the second term of the Obama administration. And I just remember this is one photo that sticks out in my mind that is like the welcome. We really do have an African-American president, which I didn't think I would see in my lifetime. So to see this image of the president and the first lady walking out, and I'm documenting this, I thought about, when I look back on it, I think about his book called The Audacity of Hope. And then what I think about is, I think of a quote from Obama's book, The Audacity of Hope. And in there, he said, "America is enough to accommodate all their dreams." And that's what I think about with this. People saw like a chance for something new in this country, a historical presidency. So in this image here, this still falls in line with the audacity of hope. And this was actually a Black History Month program that First Lady Michelle Obama hosted at the White House. And it was a day where she brought in kids from DC who live a few miles away from the White House, but had never been inside the White House. And so she had professional dance companies, the Dance Theater of Harlem, Alvin Ailey, and had them come into the White House and to have a workshop for these young dancers. And it culminated that evening with the performance by the professional dancers dancing alongside these kids. And this was just an amazing moment that I can remember of something new, a different, a change in the White House during that time. This was another moment that is strong in my memory during my documenting the Obama administration. And this was during the time there was a school shooting in Newtown. There had been another school shooting in Connecticut. And President Obama held a press conference, and he had the families there who had lost children, who had lost their first grade children to these school shootings. And here I saw, you normally think about presidents or leaders, political leaders, as not being touchable, not being relatable, not someone that you could, just go up to and have a conversation. With this, I saw a president who showed humanity, and he broke down and cried during this press conference as he spoke about these children who lost their lives in the shooting. And behind him are standing parents, the parents who lost their children during that time. And I could just remember that day being back with the press and this being a really emotional day. And I remember I could feel him about to cry, and everyone in the room got silent, and there were actually press, there crying along with him during this time.
And Cheriss,
yeah, with those images that you just showed, to me, they're very, very powerful. And for me, on the other side, because it didn't happen until 2012 when Trayvon Martin passed, and we have this new president, but on the ground, it was a different type of reality. And you had young children that were protesting. I was in Ferguson. This image for me in the memory, when I came back home, I thought about the children crusades in Birmingham in 1963. And even though we have a president, African-American president for the first time, everybody was speaking up on how we were colorblind. And his campaign was Yes, We Can. And with all the ethnic groups, we were going to come together. But on the ground, that reality wasn't there. And you have these children that's still marching. And I think about these young people right now, 2 young girls and this little young boy, and they're carrying a coffin behind them. And the young people are the ones that they use to bring about change.
And I look at this photo, Sheila, that you took, very powerful photo. And it's beautiful and it's sad at the same time.
Right.
Because I look at it like these kids should be playing. Like they shouldn't have to worry about saying my life matters and out there, marching for their rights and for their lives. So beautifully done, beautifully captured, but really sad that this is their life. This is the reality.
Right. And that's the reality that parents have to deal with in our times now when it comes to African-American children.
So this was an image in something I can remember of Congressman Lewis, and this was at the Capitol. And Congressman Lewis was there with some other Congress people, and they were having a press conference for his Voting Rights Act. And this is something that Congressman Lewis fought for his entire time, his entire career. And I remember what he would say often is, we're not in a sprint, this is a marathon. And for me, like every time I covered Congressman Lewis, no matter like if he was up on the stage at the podium, he would make his way down to talk to the people. He would make his way down to connect to the youth that were there. And I can remember conversations, being there where he was encouraging the youth to keep doing what they're doing. And he would thank them for all that they do.
And in that moment that you capture this image, for me, it feels the spirit of him, because he was a very humble person. And when he passed, I became very emotional behind that image. If you go to the next image, is another, when you see John Lewis, you see a different image of him. Your image is that soft, that moody, that kind of a spiritual kind of thing. And when you see him, he's on the ground and he's ready to go to work, and do that. And so when I photographed him, when he passed, the next image, if you could show that, I went to his memorial here in Atlanta, Georgia, the wall of John Lewis. And when I got into my car, I was very, very emotional. And I tried to call Mr. Charles Black, who started the Atlanta, he didn't start the Atlanta student movement. He was the president of the Atlanta student movement during the time of the civil rights. And I couldn't get a hold of him. And so when I got home, I've written a poem. I photograph, I don't write. And I'm going to read you this poem that came out of this memory for me at the wall. It says, today, I cried today. I thought of the elders who fought during the civil rights era, imagining their trauma. I thought of my parents, young people who endured the Jim Crow era, imagining their trauma. I thought of the young visionaries who are fighting the same injustices today, imagining their trauma. I thought of my ancestors who were forced to come to a country to be sold as property, imagine their trauma. I cried today because we lost the spirit who continued to fight the good fight. Imagine his trauma. He now knows what liberation looked like. I cried today.
Beautiful, Sheila.
2020 was a trying time for everybody. The COVID-19 happened. And then in the midst of all of this, we had another Black body falling to the ground from police brutality. And it was George Floyd. And me, myself, I have been photographing the BLM movement since 2013, since Trayvon. I've traveled internationally, nationally, speaking about this work. And when it happened to George Floyd, I felt as an image maker, what I'm photographing, is anybody listening at all? And so I wasn't going to go out, but this little voice in my head says, go. And this was the first image that I photographed on a protest here in Atlanta in Gwinnett County. And you have a young Black male that's contemplating the flag, in which he was actually holding it upside down and stepping on the flag, which the flag is in distress. But I chose to photograph him because I wanted the viewer to really look at him and contemplating about, he grew up in America. And it's like, why do we continue to have to go through this through generations?
And so similar to your photo of contemplating the flag, I can remember one day being out, and this is out in front of the White House in Lafayette Park, next to Black Lives Matter Plaza. And I remember seeing this man with this mask that pretty much covers his entire face. I could just see his eyes kind of peeking over that mask. And when I saw him, there were layers to it in my thoughts and in my memory of beautiful, suffocating. Mm-hmm. I thought about this poem by Langston Hughes called I Too Sing America. I too sing America. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes. But I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow, I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. And so that Langston Hughes poem is one of the first things I thought about when I look back on this image and remember creating that. So it ties into the whole thing, I think, with Black men in America and what was going on at that time, as you said, Sheila.
Did you have a chance to actually speak with him?
I did not. I did not.
You did not, because what I see in his eyes is sorrow. I mean, you could see a glimpse of his eyes. Mm-hmm. I still see the sorrow, and he is suffocating with the flag. Mm-hmm. I can't breathe.
Yeah. Yeah, which ties in with COVID-19 pandemic as well. So That's what I'm saying. I saw like so many layers, mm-hmm. When I created this image of this gentleman. But unfortunately, no, I didn't get to talk to him. Okay. So this is I come to know her. Her name is Shelly. And this was one of those like really quiet days at Black Lives Matter Plaza, which really was kind of like the center of where a lot of things were going on during the summer last year. And I just remember seeing Shelly and looking at her and just thinking like how powerful she looked. And so I don't all the time ask to take people's photo. You know, sometimes I'm out there on assignment and documenting. This particular day, I wasn't on assignment. And so I asked her to take her photo. I didn't direct her where to stand, how to stand, what to do. And this is what she showed. This is what she gave me. And I was really drawn to her eyes, you know, as I'm taking this photo. And I just felt like her eyes were just spoke so powerfully of resilience and strength. And she was out there, you know, with the fighting for rights, fighting for equity. And I'll never forget the look in her eyes.
Well, she commanded the attention. She gave that attention. When you see that photograph, it's like with her hand up with the fist and those eyes, it draws you to the eyes in the way that you took it up like that, about power. Yeah. And so my image is so much different from yours, Cheriss. And this image was taking all of my images since COVID has been in Atlanta. I did not travel. And this particular protest rally was Brianna. And it was after the 100 days that a lot of women from Atlanta drove up to Louisville, Kentucky. And when they heard the verdict of the police officer not being charged for anything, these women came to me like, what are we going to do? It was just like so sorrowful. And this young lady here, I saw her with her T-shirt on. It says Black Women Matter, because what's going on now is like we must protect the Black woman. And when I asked her if I could take the photograph, and she looked up. And I thought that was powerful, and, you know, against yours and mine of these Black women, you know, we must protect. And it has God is dope. And I think that fits perfectly with her eyes looking up.
And again, my image before, it's the eyes for me. Like I go to her eyes first when I look at your photo, and they speak volumes.
You go
and
to
again,
the
we
eye?
have the Black woman.
I go to the text. I don't know why my
I go to her eyes.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, the eyes is what I went to first, and then I go to her shirt.
Okay.
So this image was during a time last summer. My cousin Gianni Palmer had, we were on a conversation, and he was telling me how his 8-year-old son, Middleton, was scared to go out and thought that what happened to George Floyd could happen to them. And his 5-year-old son, Caldwell, asked him, why do white people hate Black people? So Gianni wanted to do something with his family and to show his sons that there are more people that are with you than are against you. So he decided to do a family march. He called friends, other people with their families, with their kids, and he invited me to come. So I took my camera and I just documented this experience where they marched from their house a few blocks away. And it was something that they could do right there in their neighborhood to share their voice and to show their support and to, you know, they themselves fight for equity. And it was a chance also for them to see that there were people who were in support of them, because as we were marching, cars would drive by, they would honk, you know, they would yell out, they would stop and speak, you know, other people from the neighborhood started to come out. And I went out like 4 times with them, 4 different days. And on the last day, his oldest son, who was scared that what happened to George Floyd could happen to them, actually led the march. So he became empowered by learning how to use his voice and going out with his family.
And that little girl with her eyes closed, I'm imagining what she is thinking, you know? And for her, that sign says justice for my ancestors. And I know that she actually written that, okay? But something about the closed eyes is like, I really want to know what she's thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes
and
it
she's
very
3.
powerful. And she's 3 years
Yeah,
old.
she's 3 years old.
And this is what they have to have
again,
as young as that, as 3 years old. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And her father brought her out there. That's who she's standing in front of, her dad, who's actually a Councilman Robert White here in DC. And so one of the things that he said, when I spoke to them was, I wish that my kids didn't have to come out here for this, but, I'm going to show them how they can use their voices. And, my hope is that we don't have to continue to do this over and over and over and over again, as we have been in history, has been the case. And it's always been the young people that take the lead.
Yeah, always. Mr. King always told me, who started the Atlanta student movement, he said, it's the young people. Mm-hmm. It's always been the young people. And my image, after that, you got Justice for Answers with the young girl. Mm-hmm. It's the same similar story. These are young males, and with particularly this man with the cap on, that's mm-hmm. his son. And they wanted to do something, and they came from out of suburbia. And I met them at Martin Luther King's Ebenezer Baptist Church, and they wanted to do a silent march. And what I thought that was so profound was that they came suited up, like back in the 1963. And it showed a lot of confidence, marching down the street. And they actually marched to Martin Luther King's birthplace. But he's teaching his young son about this too, and for him to come out, but in a different way, not what we normally used to seeing, a Black male with, on top of a car with the fire. This is a silent moment where you can really see and not only look at the image, but maybe listen to the image.
Yeah, it's powerful. As you said, with them coming out in suits, and it's that quiet power, mm-hmm. It's not loud, it's not in your face, but it's very strong and powerful.
Mm-hmm. In this next image, I tried to find moments last year versus what we just talked about, Cheriss, mm-hmm. about those quiet moments. And a lot of people don't really pay attention to the mothers. These mothers who lost their children to police brutality, for them to hear on the news about another body falling, that's constantly traumatizing them. And they actually held a press conference here in Atlanta, Georgia, along with the Georgia State Representative, for them to pass a bill. And you had to forgive me because it's the HB, it's HB, and I can't remember what it is, but it's a list of police officers actually who's had victims that have shot Black folks. And so these mothers are so emotional. And I just felt that she started crying, that these are some of the images that we need to show too, because it's about the protest, it's about the activists, but it's about these mothers, because that's who these activists and everybody are fighting for this inequality. And after George Floyd, we had the largest protest in American history. It was in, I believe, 50 states and in 12 countries that went global. And everybody was talking about George Floyd as symbol of change. Cheriss, do you remember his little daughter?
Yeah.
That was,
My daddy changed the world.
Yeah, my daddy changed the world. But here in Atlanta, there was another shooting right after that. And that was here with Rayshard. And this is the funeral of him. And I love this image is because the way how they delicately walked out, and they had this tapestry of his face, sunrise, sunset.
Yeah, and looking at this image, like they're taking such care and bringing this out.
carries out. And the next image is Reverend Warnock, in which this is at the Ebenezer Baptist Church, where he is the pastor at. And he came out, and for me, this was a very fierce look on his face. And now he is one of the senators here in Georgia, the first African-American senator in Georgia. And I think that that's so powerful because of what he represents.
And tying back to Congressman Lewis, he was Congressman Lewis's pastor.
Right.
And, you know, he recently, when he spoke on the Senate floor for the Voting Rights Act that his, you know, parishioner championed, he talked about, you know, even though I was his pastor, that was my mentor. You know, he's the one that led the way. So everything intersects. And that's one thing that I'll say, you know, in a lot of the work that I do and I see is that there's this intersection. And everybody is connected. Like Martin Luther King would say, there's an intersectionality. What happens to one happens to another, affects another.
You're right. I agree with that.
So this image here I was at Black Lives Matter Plaza, and this fraternity, they're called Alpha Phi Alpha, and they were marching that particular day. And what I saw was brotherhood. What I remember is brotherhood when I look back on this image. And I wanted to, when I took this photo, I wanted to bring people into how I felt that day and what I saw. So I chose to come at a lower angle, and inside of this circle, they made a large circle where they locked arms in brotherhood. And I wanted to bring people into that. And so that's why I chose to, you know, come low and shoot in between the legs of someone standing there so that I could bring someone else looking at the photo. You would be able to see like this inside of this circle.
And you often, I'll let you speak about that and I'll go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, because I wanted to say something, but go ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
This next image is also brotherhood, looking at it from a different perspective, a different way, because we had the alphas in the image, you know, right before, and this is a fraternity, they know each other. And these two men here didn't know each other, they're strangers. And this particular day was really quiet. And I keep saying what the day is, that it was quiet, because that could change so quickly. Like you could go out, you could be somewhere, it could be quiet. And then the next second you could just turn your head and it's the direct opposite. So, you know, in that, I know with the work that Sheila was doing, myself and other people who are out there, is you're really putting your life, you know, on the line sometimes out there in documenting, because you just don't know any given second what will happen. So right before this photo, I was about to go to my car and go home, and I just felt a shift. And then I saw people start to move towards the end of the street where this traffic light is, sitting in front of the park, Lafayette Park. And so I look over there and I see Mike D'Angelo, who is a guy on the left side where you can't see his face. And he was standing on top of the traffic light with a bullhorn. And so there was an agitated man below that was challenging him and asking, what is the purpose of protest? Like, I don't understand why you're out here. It doesn't make any sense. So Mike came down from the light and he started to try to explain, you know, to the men what the purpose of this protest and why it's necessary and why we're out here. And he just couldn't get the man to see what he was talking about or the purpose. So he eventually left. And so this gentleman that you see on the right that came in didn't know him, but he just walked up to Mike and gave him a hug. And I was standing right next to them when this happened. And it was a very powerful moment. It's a beautiful moment, I think, as well, because it shows a sensitivity. It shows not only brotherhood, but a sensitivity that Black men, not a lot of times, you know, would be seen as. You know, a lot of times they would be demonized. And so this was a moment of these two strangers that came together in support to say, you know, I feel you, I understand, I'm here for you.
And I also look at this not just about the Black male, but it makes me think about imagery like this, is that we don't never see imagery of African Americans in this type of way, whether it's women or whether it's men. And it's just a precious moment, a moment for that.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And yeah, with that. And what I was going to say is this, for me as a fine art photographer, I chose to shoot all of my work in black and white. And the reason why is because it's called 1960 now. And what it is that it seems like we're going back. And I tell everybody that I was playing off of that metaphor, and not into when I shoot protest images, I would always shoot it in black and white until equality and liberation come. And then I would shoot it in living color. And that's why I chose to shoot everything in black and white and continue to do so when it comes to protests.
So this image here was right before the first MAGA march that was happening in Washington, D.C. And I was out on assignment actually this day. And I was just getting how businesses were boarding up in preparation for this march that was going to happen. And so this fence that is in the photo that's in the background is a non-scalable fence that was put around Lafayette Park, which sits across the street from the White House. So it blocked people from going inside the park and closer to the White House. And so the lady on the right with the rainbow mouse ears and the Make America Great Again hat had come, and she started ripping down, and you can kind of see in the right, some of it is kind of ripped. She came and started ripping down the signs on the fence. And so the lady that she's leaning into in her face came to protect the signs and to stand against that. And I just remember like being there right at that moment when it happened and taking this photo. And so I spoke to her after, the lady on the left, and she could not remember what just happened. You know, I was talking to her about what just happened, and she was like, I honestly did not remember what just happened. So all I remember is that my friend was standing behind me, supporting me, and that's it. So this, to me, when I look at this image and the memories of this image, is how polarized our country was becoming. You know, those feelings, like Sheila said earlier, were always there, even during a time of hope. You know, it was still there, but we just became much more outwardly, you know, polarized.
But I think it was building up, you like
Of
in
course.
the Obama administration. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when the next administration came, it just exploded, it amplified.
So then we fast forward, as I'm seeing this polarization happen and things kind of bubble up from below the surface. This was a day at the Capitol on January 6th that was pretty routine. And I just remember it being quiet. And I remember this was a day that I received many texts and some calls from friends and family who were concerned about my safety, because there was a pro-Trump rally going on that they said, you know, they're talking about some things. They're talking about going to the Capitol, you know, please be careful. And I remember telling them, like, you know, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be inside. You know, I'm inside one of what I thought was the safest place in this country. And I could never imagine. So let me talk about this image. This image is the staff from the Senate side with the ceremonial electoral votes. And it's this ceremony where they were coming from, they were along with the senators and Vice President Pence, walking from the Senate chamber to the House chamber to deliver these votes. And so, like I said, it's quiet, pretty routine. And, you know, in one of the safest buildings in this country, or so I thought at that moment. And then when we go to the next image, this is what happened. So we had an insurrection, and I never would have imagined something like that would happen.
How were you feeling at the time, Cheriss, when that, and you took this image from the outside? Did you feel safe or what?
And this is from the inside, actually.
The inside. I'm
Mhm.
going to say the inside. Yeah.
I was inside the Capitol, and I just remember hearing the Capitol Police saying they're inside. I was actually barricaded in Congressman Jim Clyburn's office with his staff. And I just remember, like, it's kind of like an out of body experience, because first of all, I never imagined anything like this would ever happen at the Capitol. And my first instinct was to keep working. So that's what this photo is here. I had my laptop with me and I had my camera. So I just remember, like, standing in the window and taking this picture. So as I'm taking this picture, and what you see here, they're also inside at this time. So Sheila, I just remember it was just quiet. Like, no one was really talking in the room. Everyone was just really quiet. The lights were out, it was dark. The TV was on, but the volume was down. Mm-hmm. And I just remember, like, people crying, people praying, and just the furniture. I'll never forget the furniture just being piled up against the door. And, you know, they came a couple of times and tried to get in. And I just remember people pushing the furniture against the door, just pushing against the door, and hearing the wooden door crack. So after about the second time, that third time, we were thinking it was still them, not knowing that it was actually the Capitol Police. So I just remember, like, hearing the wood cracking and knowing that whoever was on the other side of the door was going to get in. And they did. Thankfully, it was the Capitol Police. It was SWAT. You know, they were pointing their guns at us and yelling, you know, get your hands up. You know, Sheila, I could say that my life flashed before me at least twice that I can remember, you know, that day. I didn't know what was going to happen. All I could think about is to keep working.
Has that affect your, because you go out to these rallies, has that affect you more than now, since this has happened and you was in the insurrection?
Right. To be honest with you, I think it's actually made me stronger to have, like, a stronger purpose to continue to do it, to continue to document, to continue to tell the stories, to continue to tell my story.
And I think that's good, because with my experience being on the ground since 2013, I've had incidents where it was really scary, but I felt that I needed to stay and I need to continue to do this work, even though it's traumatizing. It's
Right.
like we're like making history in the making in real time, and we really don't know that that's what we're doing at this time, you know. So yeah, it becomes very emotional.
It's emotional.
Yeah.
It's emotional. It's tough.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's what gives me strength.
Right.
At the end of the day, for me to continue documenting, to do this that I'm so passionate about, that I feel is my purpose, is, you know, what I want to continue to do.
Right.
So Cheriss and Sheila, Cheriss, you, in the image that you shared of the woman in the MAGA hat, and I'm actually going to go back to that just for a quick second. You shared that the woman on the left didn't remember what was happening.
Yeah.
Right. And clearly she's experiencing a level of trauma, but you were there to photograph that moment. And I don't know if she'll ever see the photograph, but we're seeing it, and we're making a memory here with this the photograph. And you know what you've experienced at the Capitol, Sheila, what you've experienced on the ground photographing, to be able to offer those memories to others, right? to form an opinion on what's going on, because in that moment when you're experiencing what you're experiencing, there's a likelihood you're not going to remember what you're even seeing, but the camera does.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And so I just want to take a moment to applaud you both for continuing, no matter what you've experienced, to document and to be so committed to capture moments for the rest of us to see what you've seen. So thank you both. And I'll move over to this image now of the Capitol behind the fence, Cheriss, when you are coming back now to retrieve your belongings after the insurrection.
Yeah, so the very next day, I actually had an assignment before I came back to retrieve my documents, and I had an assignment to take a portrait of Gabby Giffords. And that was like the perfect assignment to have after going through what I went through the day before, because here I'm in the presence of a woman who should not even be walking, talking, alive. And she's apologizing to me for what I went through and telling me to move ahead. So I move ahead to go back to the Capitol to retrieve my things, because I had to leave my coat, my hat, my gloves. It was really cold that night, I can remember. I had to leave all of that behind inside the Capitol. My roller bag, my camera bag, and some other items. So as I go back, so this fencing that's here was not here on the 6th. So the very next day, they put up this non-scalable fencing. They start bringing in National Guard to secure the Capitol and guard it and guard the Congress people inside. And I just remember like taking this image and seeing this flag, you know, that American flag, that this is a country where I never thought anything like this would happen. Like, I didn't sign up to be a conflict photographer. I didn't have plans to, go shoot wars and things like that. And this is happening, right here, where I live.
Not just where you live, but you also mentioned the sense of safety that you would feel when you would go into the Capitol, where you felt safer there than anywhere else. And how this has now shifted your perspective of your workspace and being able to now, approach how you make photographs, through a different lens.
Most definitely. As I was saying earlier, the Capitol was what I thought was the safest place in this country. So all of that was just upended, January 6th. And it's, I just kind of look at it, I think mentally, I think about it as any other place like outside the Capitol that's not secure, that I have to like really have my guard up.
And then
Do you feel that way again, Cheriss, when you go now? Because after the insurrection, we have a new president. Do you feel that way now when you go to the Capitol?
Yeah, because I still see things outside the Capitol that reminds us that, there's still possibilities of things. There's still, people who are angry enough to try to do something.
And then going back into, now you're inside.
I'm inside the Capitol. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to get my things, and I look up and I see these zip ties hanging on one of the doors, and it's fashioned in a noose. And it's so many remnants like the day after of what just happened. Like, even if I, couldn't remember, some of the things, just going back that next day, the images will, bring those things to memory of what happened, what we went through as a country, what I went through, personally, and my colleagues, there that day. And, I could still see like dirty boot prints on the marble stairs and floors, still some remnants of urine and blood. Like, it was just a lot of destruction. There were glass that had wood over it that had been broken out.
And it was so interesting to see how, for me, looking afar through on TV about it, it's like the people that came to for the rally, is like they were not being arrested or anything like that. The officers were very friendly with them, but when you have a BLM movement that is a rally and it's silent, like this next image I have, and they did everything according to the police officers. This was shot in Atlanta. Now they weren't protesters. They were having a rally. They were in the street marching, which they actually got a permit for. And so the officers were in the back, and they start putting their what do you call them, sirens on, telling us that we need to get to the sidewalk. And everybody went to the sidewalk, and then they immediately rumbushed this young man to and they arrested him for no reason at all. And then they have, you see the tie guys. I think about what you were talking about, like the zip ties, and then you have the zip ties on the officer. So it's like we're living in two different Americas with that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you can attest to this as well, is being out there, you could get it from any side, like out there documenting, like you really have to, I say this thing, and, some of my friends say this, like, keep your head on a swivel. And you really do have to do that, because you don't know, as I said, like at any given moment, something could happen. I've been pushed back by police, and I'm just standing on the side with my camera documenting, so that's happened to me as well. I've been in between two polarized, sides. I've been on, both sides of it. And I've been personally harassed. I've been called names just for being, having a press badge or being pressed. And, moments of people sticking their camera in my face and taking photos and taking video, yelling at me for having a mask on. So, and it comes from all different directions.
And then we transition to
the inauguration. So it's like we're going back to hope again. So we start with hope, and then we return to, hopefully healing and really, I don't want to say healing yet, because I think things need to be addressed before there's healing. There needs to be resolution before there's healing. But we have hope with the inauguration, a new administration coming in. And so this was that day of inauguration.
But even with this new administration and what you photograph, even though to me, is not, the aggression is not there as much, because if you think about last year with the administration that was there before, it was constantly tense, Mm-hmm. Is a sense of calmness, just a little bit, but we know things are still not right, And
it was especially calm because there were 15,000 National Guard troops. Mm-hmm. So this was like one of those inaugurations that had never happened before, because, normally it's open to the public and people can stand along the streets and be there at the Capitol during the swearing in, but none of that could happen because of what happened on January 6th. So, those images, the images of them standing on the steps of the Capitol, and then the image of President Biden and Dr. Jill Biden, the First Lady, standing on the steps of the White House. So
and it is giving us hope, right?
Yeah.
Hope.
So you're thinking like, okay, as you said, Obama was yes, we can, and Biden is build back better. So now we're looking to build back, and those are the things you think about, is hope, and building something new.
But then again, in Georgia, the spotlight is on them again because of the voting and the GOP with the bills, because we had record-breaking history of voting, early voting, mail-in voting, and now that wants to be taken away again. And so now we're on the ground again. I mean, you know, the activists are on the ground again, and it's like, are we learning anything? You know, are we doing anything? And I went out there to start photographing it, and they have one, I think, just a month left before the assembly concludes, but they're still putting these record voting bills on the table to stop that. So
if you go to that image that you just had pulled up, this was at the Capitol at a hearing, and these were some notes from one of the witnesses that said justice cannot be achieved without radical change. So that's speaking to what you're talking about, Sheila, in terms of, you know, being on the ground, and now we're having to fight for these voting rights, and in Georgia. So
yeah, because the next images are speaking upon what Cheriss and I are talking about with the voting rights. And Charles Blow, which is a journalist and a columnist, I'm gonna say for the New York Times, he actually felt that in order for Blacks, they need to return to the South to exercise their political power. And if you go to the next image, you see where they're out. I'm showing the Capitol of the building where it says Georgia Votes Matter. And you could go to the next image. Go ahead. Where Atlanta influenced everything. Here in Atlanta, Black women have mobilized, and Stacey Abrams, that's a little card right there. It has Fair Fight. And they were, every day they were mobilizing, and they created Joy to the Polls. And to me, this image with George Lewis in the back really explains about what Charles Blow was talking about, is coming back to the South. So we could have that political structure for that, for at least for voting rights. And it's voting rights for everybody, but it's usually people of color or people of, you know, low income.
Sheila and Cheriss, I have a question from the audience here. I'm an African-American woman living in Minneapolis, which, as you know, is the setting for the Chauvin trial. I sometimes feel restricted while I'm out practicing street photography. Do you have any thoughts on overcoming fear to continue practicing your art?
For me, I can say that I'm spiritual. So I pray before I go out and document, and that helps me to center myself. And it also helps me to stay in tune with what's going on out there. Because as I said, when you have to keep your head on a swivel, that's part of that. Also, I recommend that you don't go out by yourself. So if you have some people that, you know, you can check in with you, or you can check in with them to make sure that, you know, you're okay.
For me, I think I have been prepared, and I didn't know this earlier on in my career. I was shooting the hip hop culture, gangster rap. And I believe that actually really prepared me for what I'm doing right now, because you can't show fear. What I learned about being around that environment, you can't show fear because people observe that. And so you have to have the confidence for that. And that's how I go out and I work. And I do, Cheriss, I go out by myself. But what I'm very observant. But when I was doing a lot of traveling, believe it or not, I would speak to the Brothers of the Nation of Islam. And I know when I went to Ferguson, and they are the ones that actually better work, you know, protect me when I'm out in the street. They're watching out for me, you know. So
you do have someone that is at least, you know, can look out for you. And that's what I recommend, is that even if you don't go out with someone, that you make connection, you know, while you're there, because it does help to, at the very least, check in and say, I'm okay, you know, I'm here, I made it home, you know, I made it out, I'm in my car, you know, different things like that. So I think that's actually really important.
And then you need to have people, text people to let you know, where you're located or for that too. I think that's very, very, very important because you don't really know who to trust out in the street from either side. Either side, you do not know.
And as you continue to overcome those fears and continue to document the stories that we're seeing on the news, one of what's going on today with in Atlanta, Sheila, you seem to be located in a place where there are so many stories to be told and to be shared with the public to inform our opinions.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about this image?
Every day, there's someone out at the Capitol rallying against to protect the vote. And this particular day, it was around about, I believe, noon or 1 o'clock. And you don't find a lot of people. It's just maybe a group of, it's not like masses of people that with George Floyd or some of the other incidents. It's like a handful of people. It's about 20, but they're dedicated to be out there to protect the vote. And then think about it. They're protecting the vote for all of us because you have people that talk about, I don't understand why they are not, why are they on the ground? Why are they keep doing that? That's not going to help them. They're not organized. But I believe that Martin Luther King said that, what was the quote that he was saying about protest? Something for the people is the protest, to go out and protest.
Yeah,
because I think that,
the people.
Yeah, but we need all of it. We need the ones on the ground. We need the ones that are the politicians, because that's what's going to bring it together. And these activists and people out there, they're out there every single day, and they're going to continue to be out there every single day.
So this image is one, and I remember this day vividly. This was out in front of the African American Museum that's right across the street from the Washington Monument. And this hoop bus that had been traveling around the country came to DC. And this was an HBCU. And for those who don't know, HBCU is Historically Black College and University. And they had pulled up in front of this, in front of the museum. And this was a rally, a HBCU rally. And they were fighting for the right to, for people to go out and vote and for voting rights.
That was last year? That was last year?
Yes.
In DC, okay.
In DC. Mm-hmm.
And so there are more than, I was reading earlier, there are more than 70 bills aimed at suppressing the vote, but it's over 100, and they're introducing them regularly all the time. And we only have about 30 days left for that. And I feel that as an image maker, for me to show images, this is a sign you really don't see the people, to let people know that what's really going on here. Because if you go to the next image, which we're going to stop with, is a young person, a young male, and then it looks like her grandmother. They're in a car. This is in Atlanta, Georgia. And this is actually a Juneteenth celebration. And it goes back to Cheriss, what you were talking about is hope, is when will Martin Luther King Jr. dream come true? And what John Lewis was speaking about, we're going to survive and there will be no turning back. And so I feel that within the hope, it's going to still always be resistance. And we have to move forward with that. And with that, we need to bring joy too, in which that image that I love of that you have of the men that are embracing themselves with that.
With pain, there's joy.
Yes.
And in this image, with the Ferris wheel in the back, I think about how things just it's
360 degrees, right?
Yeah, it's cyclical. So
yeah, yes. And these young people that are experiencing this now, especially for me being in Atlanta, and this is a town heavily with a population of African Americans, they still don't understand why this is like this at all. And because this generation is one of the largest generations in history, and they have more diversity than any generation in history, and they will be able, I feel, change it, but we still have to go through that resistance.
Yeah.
And then there's hope with that.
Right.
Thank you, ladies, for this moving, powerful presentation. I just want to share a comment or two from the chat. You ladies are doing a beautiful job, and your photos are phenomenal. It takes a lot of strength to do what you do. You exude power. These images are so powerful, and the stories are ultimate inspirations during such frightening moments that are dramatic for us today. It affects you, and it affects how we see our world. So thank you again. And I apologize, I think my video might have cut off, but I do want to again thank you for your perseverance, your commitment to the pursuit of your truth in visual storytelling, to share the movements, the moments that have shaped your memories and have now influenced ours. Sheila, Cheriss, thank you so very much for your time today. I'd like to share with everyone how we could find our guests. Find Sheila Pree Bright at sheilapreebright.com and at Sheila Pree Bright on Instagram, Cheriss at cherissmay.com and at Cheriss May on Instagram. Please do give us a follow at Leica Camera USA and Leica Academy USA.
Thank you for having us.
Right. And thank you, Leica, for giving Cheriss and I this platform to speak about this work, because it's really hard. But yeah. I think that this platform that we're on is engaging in that, how we can come together collectively as people to share our stories.
And yes. I just want to encourage people to tell your story. So, that's one thing I would leave people with is, it doesn't have to be at the White House. It doesn't have to be at the Capitol. It doesn't have to be certain places, but tell the stories that are right there with you. Tell your family stories. Those things that are, stories that no one else can tell but you.
Right. And those are our memories and our moments. Yes.
Thank you again.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.